crumped up picture. But when you look at his face, what do you see? A boy excited, having a good time with his father. But little did you know that he was suffering underneath. He was, at the age of 3, he was diagnosed with leukemia. Years passed and he did beat leukemia. And then he was in his, like 11 to 12 years old. He was outside in his front yard playing with the wheelchairs, because kids like playing in wheelchairs, trying to pop a wheelie. And the chairs that he did, and he fell back and he hit his head pretty hard. So he went to the ER. They didn't suspect anything, but days later he started getting an excruciating pain in the head. So they took him and they did x-rays, where they later found tumors in his brain. So the cancer came back. And he didn't have much time. He went through chemo, where they told his parents that he had to go into hospice care. So they took him home so they could make him comfortable. At the age of 12, I was at the end of his bed where he took his last breath. So today, I am going to present to you the different types of cancers that affect children, the treatments they receive, and the research that is being done. So according to Alex's lemonade stand, they put up this chart. Over 250,000 children are diagnosed with cancer yearly. Childhood cancer is the #1 disease killer in children from ages 5 to 14. Every 2 minutes, a child is diagnosed with cancer around the world, which makes up to 300,000 people or children. Average age, it's like from 6 years old to 20, but newborns could be diagnosed with cancer also. It's a global problem. Cancer is not picky. They choose children from different ethnicities, different ages. And in the 1950s, almost every children with cancer died. There are over a dozen types of cancers. And I know you guys can't read it because it's too many, but this would be like the subtypes of leukemia, and then these would be subtypes of like brain and spinal cord cancer. And then now that you guys know a few statistics, I'm going to be speaking about Noah. Noah was diagnosed at the age of 4. He went through chemotherapy, and he's 7 years old now, and he beat cancer. He went through radiation. He went through chemo, and so 30% of children get diagnosed with leukemia, and leukemia causes bone and joint issues. So they have bone and joint problems. They get fatigue. They lose their hair due to the chemo. Weakness in their bones. They get pale skin, fever, and weight loss. And then leukemia does grow and spread quickly, so they do have to, take care of it pretty quick. And then this is Maze. Maze was diagnosed with DIPG, which is diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. She was diagnosed at the age of 3. There is no cure for DIPG. So they give them steroids, which cause them to swell up like she did. And 90%, DIPG is like 90% of the cancers that kids are diagnosed, and then they do have about 18 months to live after they're diagnosed. So they have a short life. And then this causes DIPG. Basically is a tumor. It attaches to the brainstem, and it's actually called the pon. So you can't get rid of the brainstem because you can't do you can't replace it basically. So there's nothing you can really do except for give them the best time that they can have. And then it's the brain and spinal cord. Those are all children affected by it. It's the second most common cancer that there is. This affects 26% of children. And then it starts in the lower part of the brain where for the brain and spinal cord called the cerebellum or the brainstem. This causes headaches, nausea, vomiting, blurred vision, seizures, and they start having trouble walking. So now that you know about a few cancers, let's talk about the treatments that they go through. So they go through chemotherapy, and this is using drugs to destroy cancer cells. Systemic chemo, that is basically like a pill, or they put the medication in through an IV. And then the chemo regimen, which is consists of one cycle or more, and they either give them one type of drug or a combination of drugs to the children. And then the side effects also include fatigue, risk of infection, nausea, vomiting, hair loss, and loss of appetite. Radiation, doctors try to avoid using radiation because they can affect a different part of an organ, and it also causes second cancers. So they try to avoid that. The steroids, same thing. They use steroids, but you saw how it does. It's usually used in DIPG. And then what else? Surgery. They try to remove the cancers in surgery, but they can't remove everything, so then they have to go through chemo. It's a little bit hard. Okay. And then, so now you know a little bit about the treatment. So let's talk about the research being done. And I believe this is true. Everybody panics when your phone is 4%, but only 4% of research is being done on children with cancer. So, and the NCIS, which is the National Cancer Institute, they have played a role in children's cancer research for over 50 years. They're trying to find a less toxic treatment to give to the children. And okay, 60% of children with cancer are treated part of it as a clinical trial. And a clinical trial is the research study that tests a new approach to treatments, such as drugs, combination of treatments. And then so today you learned about 3 types of cancer, which would be leukemia, DIPG, and brain and spinal cancers, the research that's being done, and the medication that they were taking in. Thank you.
Zoom. All right, Matthew, what did you think?
Well, I thought that the intro was very good, and I thought it was a little bit nostalgic, just breaking up cancers and everything. But I think she was actually trying to talk about cancers. That's what I got from the message. So I thought that she should have talked a little bit more about actually maybe preventions, cures, treatments, more. And cancer is a great topic, and it's like more of a widespread issue and major issue too. So that's a good topic to talk about. And I felt like you had to elaborate a little bit more on the preventions, cures, and symptoms. But you did pretty good on that part too. And when you said we panic when our plan is at 4%, but turn our backs when our children receive only 4%, I thought that was a good quote. And yeah. you did say we need to practice a little bit more. And I noticed that we're reading off the note cards. You didn't make quite frequent eye contact. Maybe be involved a little bit more. And towards the end, you were like card flipping. There was a slight pause. Maybe next time, rehearse a little bit more.
All right. Well, delivery issues aside, I thought that there's a lot of good stuff with the structure of the speech and the introduction. I like the introduction. I like the picture. You've got a good story to go with it. It appears that you have a personal relationship that's going on there. I don't think that that's quite as clear as to what the personal relationship was, except that you were there, and I'm not sure why. Is it a family member, you know, somebody that you were working with? I think you could explain that a little bit more. But it definitely does kind of bring us into the presentation, into the subject matter, and connects you with it in a way that builds some credibility and foresight into what you're going to be talking about. The thesis statement is fine. It's general, but it's fine. And there's a solid preview. Nothing spectacular, but we know generally where you're headed. I did think in the body of the speech that you did a pretty good job on that. Maybe it's a little too organized at times because the first and second sections end up sounding like a lot of listing. And you don't really want to overdo the listing kind of thing. I think you only have the 3 types of cancer that you're mentioning in that first point, and I think you need to explain a little bit why you picked those. My impression was that they were the most typical kinds of cancer, but I'm not sure that that was as clear as it needed to be, especially since they weren't in the order in which they were most typical. So maybe you could highlight that a little bit more so that it'll be easier. But the second and the third points in the rest of the speech that you signpost them fine. It's a topically organized speech, so I could see that there are dividing points between the information that you're presenting. There's early source citation, but then it's a little inconsistent. At the end, we get and I wrote it down NCIS, and I know it's not the TV show. It's the other. It's the Cancer Institute that you're talking about there. But in between that first citation and the stuff that's coming at the end, I got they referred to quite a bit. They say, they are, they do, they want, they try, they. And I'm going, you got to find another pronoun. Or a noun. Doctors try, or researchers investigate, or the National Cancer Institute believes, or Dr. So-and-so at this hospital says, that sort of thing. The more precise you can be, I think that it'll enhance your credibility in the presentation. The second 2 sections, like I said, I think are a little problematic because we get lots of lists. Actually, I guess it's the first 2. The first one, you got a list of all of these cancers, and you're not going to talk about all of them.
Yeah.
So that gets to be a little distracting. And then on the second point, when you got all of the treatments, the same sort of thing. We've got a whole bunch of them. And the colors on a couple of them make it hard to see. We've got kind of dark blue against black, and it's like, I think we need a little more contrast. Or maybe if you turned on the lights for some of those things, it would be a little clearer to see. But I think it would be one of those things where you need to maybe make an adjustment on the colors on those sorts of things. Your chart from the Lemonade group at the beginning, too much information there. You needed to pick out the 1 or 2 pieces of information that you're using on that. This would be a good place to use that snipping tool that most people have on their computers. So snip the part of the image that you want to use, enlarge it a little bit, and use the section that means something, and cut out all of the other stuff. So I'm not a video editor, but if I can figure out how to do that kind of stuff, you guys, I'm sure, can do this in your sleep, because you have been living with this technology since you were little kids, and so I'm sure it's just second nature. And that's one of those things that people need to think about doing when they're putting their presentations together. The presentation things, I thought that you did a pretty good job speaking to the audience. I did notice that you had to look at the cards occasionally, but I didn't think that you were overly dependent. You often sounded like you were talking to us, and even if you did have to look down a little bit, that's not a problem. The ums and ahs and that sort of stuff, we'll worry about that next time. It'll get better.
Yeah.
He's right. A little more practice is always going to help. Thank you.